Netcare now has significant hospital operations in South Africa and the United Kingdom.
Right, so we're really doing a bit of a sectoral tour here, but of course it's a similar business in a way because structurally it was the same combination of UK and South Africa, but a completely different business.
Market cap 45.3 billion rand, a PE here, 15.5 dividend yield of 3.1%. Let's get that share price graph up from the outset, and that'll give us a sense of where Richard Friedland and his team are.
It did well during the period where it kind of negotiated itself out of the property-related obligations of its UK business. Since then, a little bit drifty.
Yes, so I think what we've seen is, and you mentioned healthcare in terms of your portfolio, I think it's been quite disappointing as a sector. We all like the sort of secular growth stories, aging populations.
The defensive nature of healthcare, come good or bad
but
times.
I guess a lot of it was
sick.
in the price already. The operational performance of these groups has actually slowed. I think what we're seeing is the big medical scheme providers also starting to throw their weight a little, and obviously the governments there's been this ongoing competition commission investigation into pricing, so we have seen margins get squeezed a bit and the earnings the momentum come off a bit. So and the share prices have moderated as a result. I think all those sort of secular growth aspects are still in place, but it's more reasonable valuations.
Now, Paul, this is interesting because this is one that we are not exposed to.
We're not. We're in Mediclinic, which has actually done worse, but we won't go into that today. Netcare, look, locally I think is fine. I mean, there is a little bit of pushback from the South African government and this National Health Initiative talk, but we all know as we sit here how poorly the public sector is doing with regard to providing healthcare in this country. The private healthcare industry is a huge national asset, and I think will remain so. There's some new facilities they're developing, it's doing fine, and there's plenty of market expansion opportunity. The UK, of course, is tricky. The National Health Service there doesn't want to pay them to do work that overflows, and the number of people in the UK that feel rich enough to go and do private procedures or pay extra for private healthcare on top of the NHS is perhaps a little bit less than it was before. How do you feel about the UK business?
So I think because the BMI operation in the UK is quite exposed to the vagaries of the NHS, and what we have seen is the government pulling back, somewhat of a failing of the NHS system. They look like closing a lot of facilities. What we see that BMI will actually benefit, Netcare will benefit, because there is that overflow of caseload. So they place the cases with the BMI hospitals. The margins aren't as good, but the underlying growth is there because, as you mentioned, the private healthcare market's not as developed, and I think there is a short-term hesitation on that.
But if you see stress in the public healthcare environment, then you're saying that spillover is net positive for the private players.
That's right, and we saw some growth in the caseload in their recent results. The translation of the earnings is obviously less now that the pound has weakened, but it hasn't. The BMIs, it's quite heavily geared. It was sort of a private equity type deal, so isn't that much equity value in the share price. So it has some upside, I guess, still from these levels.
So it sounds as though you're going to go hot on this.
I think the valuation's a lot more reasonable. I think, we like it.
Are you going to follow Rowan?
Yeah,
into
I
this
think
discussion?
so. You know, almost 70 million Brits. They're not going to miraculously get, well and not need to go to hospital because
How
of the
about we
Brexit
swap Mediclinic I Netcare?
I don't think so, because I think Mediclinic really has fallen to absurd levels, but I'm hot on Netcare all the same.
Do you like that? Would you like my strategy?
I mean, I guess Mediclinic, they also have had some missteps. So I think from these levels, we could see them recover nicely.
All right. So I won't force that strategy. Neither of you agree with